The mirror doesn't lie, but it doesn't tell the whole truth either. What it reflects is a face, a body, a time stamp of decay, but what it never shows is the ache that hasn't aged. You look into it and see the lines deepening, the skin loosening, the glow retreating, but inside you still feel like a 17-year-old waiting for someone to choose you. That hunger never left. It just learned to wear adult clothes, speak in sophisticated silence, pretend to enjoy solitude. But deep down, the hunger stayed, untouched, unaged, unhealed. And now it bleeds in private, behind layers of independence and intellectual armor. There's a kind of grief that doesn't cry. It lingers in the background of your thoughts, like an echo you can't quite locate. A grief not for lost love, but for the love you never allowed yourself to receive without performance. Carl Jung once said, "Youth ends when egocentrism becomes unbearable." But what if that moment never came? What if the ego grew clever but never quiet? What if it still begs for applause, just with more subtlety and more shame? You dress it well, you disguise it as ambition, you call it standards. You tell yourself it's about respect, but at night when the mirror is just glass and you're just flesh and memory, it whispers again, "Why didn't they choose me?" This isn't about vanity, it's about survival. Because somewhere deep in the architecture of your being, you still believe that being seen is the only proof that you exist. And when that gaze doesn't come, when youth fades and admiration vanishes with it, you start to ask questions you were too afraid to ask when you were beautiful. Was I ever loved, or was I just wanted? Was I ever real or just projected? The body ages, but the desperation stays the same. It hides better, but it still screams in the silence. And maybe, just maybe, what you call maturity is nothing but the exhaustion of chasing the same love with older hands. So let me ask you something you've never dared to ask aloud. How old is your desperation to be loved? Because that's where we begin. You say you've learned to be alone, that solitude became your sanctuary, that you no longer need anyone. But there's a silence between your words, a tension that gives you away. Because somewhere beneath the armor, you're still hoping someone will notice the echo inside your chest and stay. You've built an impressive mask. You say things like, "I enjoy my own company." But behind those words is a wound, a hunger that's never been named, only hidden under layers of adult language. It's not that you're lying. You do enjoy solitude, in theory. But sometimes, when the light in the room shifts just right, when the night feels a bit too long, you remember what it felt like to be held without needing to perform. You miss that feeling, even if it never really existed, even if it was just a dream you kept alive to survive your early loneliness. The ego grew up, learned to play strong, to be desirable, mysterious, in control. But beneath it, it's still begging not to be abandoned again, not to be forgotten, not to be invisible. And the worst part, you've gotten so good at pretending you're okay that now even you believe it, until a small comment pierces through and the child in you flinches. That child never aged. It just got quieter, more strategic. It learned that direct need scares people away. So now it whispers instead. If I say I'm fine, maybe they'll ask twice. If I act like I don't care, maybe they'll come closer. But they don't, because the world doesn't chase strength. It responds to authenticity, even when it's messy. You're not missing someone. You're missing being someone who mattered, someone who made another soul pause and stay. You're not seeking company. You're seeking confirmation that you're still lovable. Even when you're not performing emotional independence, that's not weakness. That's a very old wound, finally asking to be seen without shame. You were trained to believe beauty is a currency and youth is its expiration date. Not explicitly, not with words, but in the way admiration fades when your skin begins to speak of time. In the way compliments once came easily. and now arrive less often, if at all. In the way eyes scan past you now, searching for something newer, smoother, more alive. This isn't vanity. This is the survival instinct of a soul raised to equate worth with desirability. So when the mirror begins to betray you, when it stops reflecting the version of you that once turned heads, you don't just feel older, you feel irrelevant. And that word, it cuts deeper than loneliness, because irrelevance means unseen. And if you are not seen, what proof do you have that you still matter? You try to laugh it off, to say you've matured, that you no longer crave attention. But inside, the panic remains, a silent storm beneath the still water of your public composure. You stand in front of the mirror and adjust yourself. You tilt your chin, you catch the light, you chase the angle that still looks like love might find you. But it's not the body you're fighting for. It's the illusion that being desired is the same as being loved. You were never told that love can outlast beauty. Only that beauty makes love possible. So now that the glow is fading, you fear that love too will go with it. The cult of youth didn't just sell you products. It sold you a deadline, a silent clock counting down to invisibility. And maybe now you're not afraid of aging. You're afraid of becoming an extra in your own life, background noise in a world obsessed with fresh starts and flawless skin. But here's the secret no one told you when you were young. Real love doesn't chase youth, it sees through it. And sometimes it only becomes possible when the performance ends, when the body can no longer distract and the soul has nothing left to sell. That's when you'll know whether you were ever truly loved or just beautifully mistaken for someone who could be. There's a ghost that follows you, not of someone who died, but of someone who never fully lived. The person you were supposed to become, the version of you that once felt inevitable. You were praised for your potential, told you were gifted, special, a future wrapped in expectations you never quite unfolded. And now, years later, you carry a grief that has no funeral. Because how do you mourn what was never born? How do you bury a self that lived only in your imagination? You're not stuck in the past. You're stuck in the idea of a future that never came. A life you thought would appear once you were ready, once you healed, once you felt deserving. But readiness is a myth, and time, it didn't wait for you to feel worthy. It kept moving and took the version of you that might have been with it. Now you scroll past others who seem to have become what you postponed, and the shame hits quietly, not loud enough to collapse you, but just enough to keep you from beginning again. You call it procrastination, but it's not laziness. It's fear. Fear that even if you try now, it's already too late. But the truth is more brutal than that. It's not that you ran out of time. It's that the excuse ran out. The illusion of someday no longer works. And what's left is the bitter question, why didn't I become who I was meant to be? But meant to be by whom? A parent, a teacher, a younger self who knew nothing of what it means to survive. The guilt still poisons you. It seeps into your relationships, into your self-worth, into your silence. Because when you don't become the person you promised yourself, you start to believe you're a disappointment, not to the world, but to the one person who can never leave you, your own reflection. But maybe it's time to grieve that fantasy, to let it go, not with resentment, but with reverence, because even unrealized versions of us deserve a proper goodbye. And once they're gone, maybe you'll find something quieter, something real, growing in the space where the fantasy once stood. You say you're looking for love, but most nights, what you're really craving is anesthesia, a hand to hold so you don't collapse, a pair of eyes that see through your performance and stay anyway, someone to decode your silence without demanding translation. It's not romance, it's rescue. You want someone to walk in and fix the wreckage you've been living with for years, the loneliness, the shame, the parts of you even you avoid looking at in the mirror. You're not asking to be understood, you're asking to be forgiven for everything you never became. This isn't love, it's survival dressed in soft language. You imagine them, the one, the healer, the silent savior, They'll arrive, hold you, name your wounds and say, I see you, I choose you even like this. But that's not love, that's projection. And projection always disappoints because no one can carry what you refuse to hold. What you're calling love is really a fantasy of disappearing, of being enveloped so completely that you no longer have to deal with yourself, but no relationship survives that weight. And deep down, you know it. You've sabotaged enough connections to prove it. Because it's not that you can't be loved. It's that you refuse to believe love that sees the truth can still stay. So you push, you test, you wait for them to leave so you don't have to confront the part of you that always does. And here's the secret, the fantasy never tells you. Even if someone could love every broken part of you, you still wouldn't feel whole until you stop abandoning yourself first. The ego doesn't want to be loved for who it is. It wants to be loved for what it hides. And until that shift happens, every kiss will taste like hope, but end in silence, because what you're searching for isn't a person. It's a place inside yourself you've never dared to enter alone. You've aged, but the fear of rejection is still in its teens. It never grew up. It just got better at pretending it doesn't exist. You laugh about your age. You say it proudly, like a badge. But inside, there's a calculation, a quiet equation. You were taught by a world obsessed with youth. Less beauty equals less love. And even if you don't believe it consciously, your reflection flinches when you catch it unexpectedly. There's a moment, late at night, when the house is silent and your skin feels unfamiliar, like you're wearing someone else's story. A story that no longer seduces, no longer promises anything new. You used to walk into a room and feel chosen. Not always, but enough to feel seen. Now you walk in and wonder if anyone noticed at all. And that question, am I still visible? Am I still wanted? It doesn't scream, it whispers, soft enough to ignore during the day, loud enough to keep you awake at night. You're not afraid of aging, not really. You're afraid of what aging represents, a quiet erasure, a vanishing of possibilities, the end of being someone's first glance, first choice, first desire. And that fear, it doesn't come from vanity. It comes from a life spent measuring your worth through eyes that weren't your own. When love depends on admiration, growing older feels like punishment because admiration fades. But the need to be seen, it doesn't. So you adapt. You become wise, spiritual, low maintenance. You dress your longing in dignity, but inside you're still waiting for someone to choose you with the same hunger they once chose youth. And until you confront that longing, until you stop asking the mirror to validate what only your soul can claim, every birthday will feel like a countdown to emotional irrelevance. But maybe the real liberation isn't in being chosen again. It's in choosing yourself without needing to be admired to feel alive. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. You remember yourself as someone who used to shine. Maybe not out loud, but in your fantasies, you were radiant, desired, admired, promising. But when you look closely, that memory starts to blur, because the love you think you lost with age might never have been real to begin with. You weren't adored. You were trying to be, performing a version of yourself that felt acceptable, faking confidence to cover the fear that no one would want what was truly underneath. And now, decades later, you grieve that performance like it was a home. But it was never a home. It was a stage. And every compliment was applause for a mask you couldn't take off. You're not mourning youth. You're mourning the illusion that you were ever fully seen. You still try to prove yourself, not to strangers, but to a father who never softened, to a mother who loved with conditions, to an ex who only saw fragments of you, to a younger self who thought success would finally silence the pain. You chase their approval in your silence. You seek it in every mirror, every awkward social moment, every time you scroll past someone living the life you think you should have had. The shame isn't in aging. The shame is in realizing you never truly loved yourself, not even when the world called you beautiful. And now that beauty is fading, you're forced to confront the one truth that youth protected you from. You've never felt enough, not even in your prime. That wound has nothing to do with wrinkles. It has everything to do with the way you learn to look at yourself, not with affection, but with scrutiny. You were never taught how to love your own face, only how to make it acceptable to others. And so the aging feels violent, because the lie is falling apart, and beneath it you're not sure what's left. But maybe that's not a tragedy. Maybe that's the beginning. Because when the performance dies, there's a chance, a small, trembling chance, that what remains is finally you. Most mirrors only show skin, reflections of form, not essence. But there's another mirror, darker, slower, more brutal, the kind you can't escape when the lights are off and there's no one left to impress. Sit with yourself, not metaphorically, literally. 10 minutes. No makeup, no posture, no performance, just your face, your eyes, your silence. And watch. At first, you'll see the obvious, the imperfections, the age, the features you've learned to critique by instinct. Then, something shifts. Your face stops being a face. It becomes a memory, a question, a ghost of everything you've tried to suppress. Look closer. That twitch in the corner of your mouth? It's not tension. It's a plea. That gaze avoiding itself. It's the child, still waiting. Still hoping someone will rescue them, still believing that love, real love, will one day walk in and make sense of the years you spent disconnected from your own reflection. This isn't therapy. This is reckoning. Because what stares back isn't just a person. It's a collection of all the roles you've played, the masks that outlived their usefulness, the smiles that weren't real, the silence that was survival. And in that stillness, a question forms. Not loud, not demanding, just present. What part of me is still waiting to be rescued? Not healed, not fixed, just seen. You don't need to kill the ego. You don't need to transcend the self. You just need to stop letting the part of you that's terrified of rejection write the whole story. Because that part, the one begging for validation, for recognition, for mercy, it's not evil. It's just young and tired. And maybe all it ever needed was someone, finally, to look it in the eyes and stay. Carl Jung wrote, "What you do not confront in yourself will eventually become your fate." And maybe now you understand why. Because everything you avoided, the hunger, the shame, the grief for who you never became, it didn't disappear. It fermented, became the background noise of your relationships, the fatigue in your voice, the weight behind your eyes. You kept waiting for someone to love you enough to quiet that storm, but no one could, because the storm wasn't theirs. It was your own. You thought love would arrive with a younger body, that maybe if you stayed attractive enough, soft enough, desirable enough, you'd finally be chosen in the way you always longed for. But the love you need now doesn't come from another body. It comes from standing in front of that mirror and refusing to look away. It's not romantic. It's not poetic. It's raw, unforgiving, necessary. You can't rewind. You can't go back and be the person you were supposed to be, but you can do something far more powerful. You can become real, not ideal, not admired, real. Because the loneliness you feel, it's not lack of company, it's the absence of reconciliation. You've lived next to yourself for years. You've slept beside your own soul like a stranger. But now, something's different. You've looked, really looked. And once you see the part of you that's still begging for love, you can stop pretending it doesn't exist. You still have time, not to impress, not to conquer, not to be everything you promised as a child, but to meet yourself, without shame, without disguise, and offer the one thing no one ever truly gave you, unconditional presence. You're not too old. You're just tired of being someone you never truly were.